20 feet? She repeated, raising an eyebrow. For a garden trellis? That's ambitious. Indeed, I beamed, trying to look like an enthusiastic horticulturist. Planning on growing some very vigorous wisteria. Needs robust support. And, you know, it also helps provide necessary, landscape definition and separation. It meets the 20-foot height limit for accessory structures in my zone, right? Ordinance 34B, point. She shuffled through some papers, sighed, and pulled out a zoning map. Yeah, looks like accessory structures can go up to 20 feet back there, as long as they're more than 5 feet from the side property line. Wait, yours is only 6 inches? From the wall face to the line, yes, I clarified quickly. But the footing might extend slightly further, meeting the spirit of the setback for support structures, and it's primarily a vertical garden element. I hoped I sounded convincing. She chewed her lip, clearly confused, but seeing that the height number technically matched the accessory structure limit on her chart. Never seen a trellis made of solid concrete block before, she muttered. But the dimensions seem technically compliant on paper, I guess. She hesitantly stamped the permit. Success? Life was pretty normal before the wall. Reasonably normal, anyway. Saturday afternoons usually involved me, my trusty grill, the questionable smoke signals produced by my attempts at barbecue, and maybe the distant sound of my kids laughing or squabbling over a rogue frisbee. My backyard wasn't huge, but it was mine. A little patch of greenish grass, a slightly wobbly patio set, and a fence separating my domain from my neighbor's. A neighbor whose existence I knew primarily through the passive-aggressive missives delivered by Stanislav Stan Mirov, chairman of our Homeowners Association Architectural Review Committee, and High Chancellor of all things beige. I was out there one perfect Saturday, burgers sizzling, emitting that beautiful, greasy haze that signals summer, when Stan appeared at my gate. Not my neighbor, mind you, but Stan, the HOA's official harbinger of joylessness, clipboard firmly in hand. "Mr. Henderson," he began, adjusting his glasses. No hello. Stan didn't do pleasantries. Pleasantries weren't in the approved social interaction palette, probably. "Stan," I greeted him, flipping a burger. "What's up, lawn clippings escape again?" He ignored my attempt at levity. "Mr. Henderson, the board has received communication." He paused, consulting his clipboard as if it held the secrets of the universe. "Regarding spatial considerations along your western property line." I stopped flipping. "Spatial considerations?" I repeated slowly. "What does that even mean? Did a rogue molecule from my burger smoke drift across the imaginary line? Did little Timmy's frisbee accidentally achieve low orbit and land in their prize-winning petunias? The neighbor Stan represented was notoriously precious about their petunias." Stan looked down his nose. "It's more a matter of presence, Mr. Henderson, and ensuring adequate separation is maintained between properties." He cleared his throat. "We trust you will take appropriate steps to be more mindful and respect your neighbor's space moving forward." I stared at him. Respect their space? How, specifically? What am I doing now that constitutes disrespecting their space? Is it the grilling? The kids playing? Me existing too loudly? Stan gave a vague, dismissive wave. "Just be mindful, Mr. Henderson. Respect the space. Ensure appropriate separation. The board is confident you understand the need for neighborly consideration." He clearly didn't understand himself. He was just parroting some garbled complaint relayed through the HOA grapevine. He made a check mark on his clipboard and marched off, leaving me bewildered and holding a spatula dripping burger grease. Respect their space. Appropriate separation. The phrases bounced around my head like angry bees. What did they want? A 10-foot demilitarized zone? Should I install laser grids? Was I supposed to conduct my backyard activities in complete silence, perhaps communicating only through interpretive dance? Being a generally reasonable guy, despite Stan's apparent opinion to the contrary, I actually tried. I really did. I moved the grill to the opposite side of the yard, hoping the smoke would drift towards the other neighbor, who seemed less prone to complaining about airborne particulates. I instituted a strict no toys beyond the patio rule for the kids. I stopped playing music outside altogether, even soft classical. I basically tried to turn my backyard into a silent, odorless void whenever I was out there. I felt like a ghost haunting my own property. Did it work? Did my efforts at mindful invisibility appease the unseen, easily disrespected neighbor? Of course not. 2 weeks later, another official HOA envelope arrived. Inside, another vaguely worded warning. Concerns remain regarding boundary respect along western property line. Further reports indicate inadequate spatial deference. Please ensure immediate and ongoing compliance with neighborly consideration standards. Chloe, you are not going to believe this, I yelled into the phone later that day, pacing my living room like a caged tiger. I got another letter. After weeks of basically tiptoeing around my own yard like a ninja librarian, it just says failure to adequately respect neighbors' spatial requirements. It still doesn't say what I'm doing wrong. Chloe, my ever-patient friend and confidant in HOA absurdity, sighed. Okay, Greg, that's officially moved from annoying into the realm of psychological warfare. Spatial requirements. What are they? Space aliens defining their personal orbit. Maybe you should send Stan a formal request for blueprints detailing the exact space that requires respecting. I tried, I groaned, collapsing onto the sofa. I cornered Stan by the community mailbox yesterday, asked him point-blank, Stan, what specific action-grilling kids' noise the color of my lawn chairs is causing the offense? You know what he said? Let me guess, Chloe drawled. Just be mindful. Maintain appropriate distance, I corrected, mimicking Stan's stiff tone. He just kept repeating it like a broken record. Appropriate distance. Respect the space. It's like talking to a beige brick wall. And then it hit me, a beige brick wall. I sat bolt upright. Space, separation, distance, they wouldn't define it. They wouldn't clarify. They just kept demanding this vague concept of separation. If they wanted separation, what provides more absolute, undeniable, definitive separation than a wall? Not a flimsy fence, a wall, a big one. A really, really big one. The thought started as a flicker of pure, unadulterated spite. But the more I considered it, the more beautiful it became in its sheer, literal-minded absurdity. They wanted me to respect their space? Fine. I would give them all the space. I would respect their space so hard they wouldn't even know I existed on the other side of it. How much space? How much separation is appropriate? 6 feet, 10, child's play. No, this called for a grand gesture. 20 feet. A 20-foot wall. That sounded appropriately respectful, didn't it? The Great Wall of Greg was born. Now, obviously, you can't just throw up a 20-foot wall in a suburban backyard without attracting some attention, primarily from the clipboard-wielding Stans of the world. I knew the biggest hurdle would be the HOA's inevitable apoplexy regarding wall height. Standard fence height limits were usually around 6, maybe 8 feet if you were lucky. 20 feet was firmly in castles and fortresses territory. I needed a loophole, a big one. Out came the HOA binder, again, along with printouts from the city planning department's website. I spent hours cross-referencing bylaws, zoning ordinances, and definitions. Fence height, max 8 feet on property lines. Okay, but what if it wasn't on the property line? What if it was built, say, 6 inches inside my property line? Would it still be a fence? Or would it then fall under the rules for accessory structures? Bingo. Section 17, subsection D. Accessory structures, including sheds, gazebos, pergolas, and other detached garden features, shall not exceed 20 feet in height, provided they meet required property line setbacks, typically 5 feet, but check specific plot plan. My wall wouldn't be a fence, oh no, it would be an other detached garden feature, specifically a vertical landscape installation support structure. Its purpose? To support, very ambitious, very tall climbing vines. Yes. And purely coincidentally, of course, to provide that appropriate separation the HOA kept demanding. It was beautiful, it was flimsy, it was perfect. Next came the permits. This required careful navigation. I drew up plans, simple, stark plans for a 20-foot-high, 40-foot-long concrete block wall, set 6 inches inside my property line, faced with a delightful, HOA-approved shade of beige stucco. Because if I was going to do this, I was going to do it with maximum visual monotony. I labeled the plans, Proposed 20 Vertical Garden Trellis Support Structure. I took them down to the city planning office, bracing myself for rejection. The clerk, a young woman who looked profoundly bored, squinted at the plans. 20 feet, she repeated, raising an eyebrow. For a garden trellis? That's ambitious. Indeed, I beamed, trying to look like an enthusiastic horticulturist. Planning on growing some very vigorous wisteria, needs robust support, and you know, it also helps provide necessary, landscape definition and separation. It meets the 20-foot height limit for accessory structures in my zone, right? Ordinance 34B. She shuffled through some papers, sighed, and pulled out a zoning map. Yeah, looks like accessory structures can go up to 20 feet back there, as long as they're more than 5 feet from the side property line. Wait, yours is only 6 inches? From the wall face to the line, yes, I clarified quickly. But the footing might extend slightly further, meeting the spirit of the setback for support structures, and it's primarily a vertical garden element. I hoped I sounded convincing. She chewed her lip, clearly confused, but seeing that the height number technically matched the accessory structure limit on her chart. Never seen a trellis made of solid concrete block before, she muttered. But the dimensions seemed technically compliant on paper, I guess. She hesitantly stamped the permit. Success. Getting HOA approval was the next hurdle. I submitted the plans to Stan and the ARC, again carefully labeling it vertical garden feature. Stan called me almost immediately. Mr. Henderson. His voice was tight with suspicion. This 20-foot vertical garden feature. It looks remarkably like a solid wall. Not at all, Stan, I replied cheerfully. It's a support structure for climbing plants, very vertical landscaping. And importantly, I added, twisting the knife, it will provide that definitive, appropriate separation and respect for space that the board so wisely recommended. It uses ARC-approved beige stucco, and as you can see, it's situated entirely on my property, fully compliant with accessory structure regulations. There was a long pause filled with what I could only imagine was Stan furiously flipping through his binder. Then, the materials and setback appear technically compliant, he finally conceded, sounding deeply unhappy about it. Proceed with construction, but be advised, the RC will monitor the installation very closely. Game on, Stan, game on. Ordering materials was an experience in itself. Yes, hello, big box hardware? I need, let's see, 8 pallets of standard concrete blocks delivered. Yes, 8. No, I'm not building a doomsday bunker. It's for gardening. Vertical gardening. Very, very tall gardening. The delivery driver looked at the pile of blocks in my driveway like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. Construction began. First, the foundation. This wasn't a job for a shovel. I had to hire a mini excavator. The noise and mess immediately attracted attention. Stan was out there daily, observing from his side of the property line, clipboard in hand, measuring the trench depth with his eyes. Mrs. Peterson's curtains twitched non-stop. Then came the blocks. Block after tedious block. Mortar mixed, troweled, block set, leveled-ish. It was back-breaking work. I hired a couple of masons to help, guys who clearly thought I was nuts but were happy for the work. 20 feet, boss? One of them asked, squinting up as the wall passed the 10-foot mark. What exactly are you trying to keep out? Giraffes? Neighbors, I muttered. Just respecting their space. The wall climbed, 6 feet, 8 feet, the legal limit for a mere fence. It kept going, 10 feet, 12, 15. It started blocking the afternoon sun from my own patio. Neighbors I barely knew stopped by to stare, mouths slightly agape. Stan's visits became more frequent, his expression darker each time. Mr. Henderson, he called across the yard one afternoon, as we hoisted blocks onto the 16-foot level scaffolding. This structure is becoming visually dominant. It is significantly exceeding standard fence height conventions. Like I told you, Stan, I yelled back over the clang of tools. Not a fence, accessory garden structure, permitted, approved, just providing that crucial separation. I gave him a cheerful, mortar-dusted wave. He retreated, muttering into a walkie-talkie, presumably reporting my progress to the beige high command. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of concrete dust and aching muscles, we reached the summit. 20 feet. It was immense. It loomed. It dominated. It cast a shadow like a biblical prophecy. We applied the final layer of soul-crushingly compliant beige stucco. The scaffolding came down. I stepped back, wiping sweat and stucco from my brow, and truly beheld my creation. The Great Wall of Gregg. 20 feet high, 40 feet long, 6 inches inside my property line. A sheer, blank, beige monolith dedicated to the principle of malicious compliance. It didn't just respect my neighbor's space. It obliterated any visual or atmospheric connection to it whatsoever. It was hideous. It was glorious. It was done. The reaction was not long in coming. Stan Miroff appeared almost instantly, as if summoned by the removal of the last piece of scaffolding. He wasn't alone this time. Trailing nervously behind him was a woman I vaguely recognized as Mrs. Henderson's petunia-obsessed neighbor, the likely source of the original "respect my space" complaint. They stopped at the property line and just stared. Up and up and up. Stan's clipboard slipped from his nerveless fingers. The neighbor lady made a small, strangled, gasping sound. Stan's face cycled through disbelief, horror, and finally, apoplectic rage. His complexion clashed violently with my beige wall. "Henderson!" he finally choked out, finding his voice. It was thin and reedy with fury. What in the name of all that is decent and beige is that?" I leaned casually against the base of my wall. It felt cool and solid, permanent. "That, Stan," I announced calmly, "is my vertical garden feature, 20 feet tall as permitted by the city and approved by the ARC, built entirely on my property, using ARC-approved stucco. And most importantly," I gave him my most helpful smile, "it provides the definitive, appropriate separation and demonstrates the utmost respect for space that the HOA board so strongly recommended I implement." "Separation?" Stan shrieked, finding his volume now. "This isn't separation, it's a monstrosity. It's blocking all the sunlight from Mrs. Gable's prize-winning petunias." So it was Mrs. Gable. "It's hideous. It's oppressive. It's a bloody wall." Technically, I corrected gently. It's an accessory structure, designed to support vigorous climbing vines, and it very effectively ensures that my family's activities, I gestured vaguely towards my now deeply shaded patio, such as grilling, breathing, or perhaps even existing, no longer impinge upon Mrs. Gable's delicate spatial requirements. You're welcome. Stan sputtered, words failing him. Mrs. Gable looked like she might faint. Stan jabbed a finger towards the wall, then towards me, then back at the wall. Lawyers, he finally managed. Fines. Demolition. You haven't heard the end of this, Henderson. This wall will come down. He grabbed Mrs. Gable's arm and practically dragged her away, presumably to start drafting emergency bylaws against excessively tall garden features. I watched them go, then turned back to my wall. It loomed, silent and beige. Maybe 20 feet was a bit much, but damn, it felt good. The HOA, as expected, went nuclear. An emergency board meeting was convened. Certified letters demanding the wall's immediate removal began arriving daily. Legal threats flew thick and fast. They fined me for everything they could think of. Unauthorized structure exceeding fence height limitations. I cited my permit for an accessory structure. Creation of visual blight. I cited the ARC-approved beige stucco. Deprivation of neighbors' natural light. I cited the lack of any bylaw guaranteeing sunlight. Improper use of accessory structure permit. I insisted my wisteria just hadn't grown in yet. My defense remained consistent. I was merely fulfilling the HOA's own vague directive to respect space and provide appropriate separation in the most definitive way possible, using a structure that was, according to my permits and interpretation of the bylaws, technically legal. My lawyer, a friend doing it pro bono mostly for the sheer entertainment value, had a field day drafting responses filled with phrases like maliciously literal compliance and estoppel based on prior ARC approval of structure. Life in the shadow of the Great Wall of Gregg was different. My backyard was definitely shadier, which was nice on hot days, but death to my already struggling lawn. Projecting movies onto the vast beige expanse on summer nights, however, was an unexpected perk. Mrs. Gable's yard, from what I could glimpse around the edges, seemed to have become a permanent twilight zone. Her petunias did not look happy. Neighborhood opinion was sharply divided. Some thought I was a hero striking a blow against HOA tyranny. Others thought I was a lunatic who had single-handedly destroyed property values with my beige monstrosity. Kids seemed to love it, calling it the castle wall. The legal battle dragged on. The HOA argued intent. I argued technical compliance. They argued aesthetics. I argued permits. They threatened massive fines. I threatened counterclaims for harassment based on their vague initial demands. In the end, it came down to a tense negotiation. The wall was causing real problems, sunlight deprivation, potential drainage issues, and the undeniable fact that it looked utterly ridiculous. The legal fees were mounting on both sides. The HOA, represented by a weary-looking Stan and their lawyer, offered a deal. They would drop all fines, retract all complaints, past and pending, and formally agree in writing to cease all future complaints regarding my backyard activities. Smoke, noise, kids, frisbees, breathing the works. Provided I agreed to reduce the wall's height to a standard, legally unambiguous 8 feet. They even offered to split the cost of the demolition and rebuilding of the shorter wall. I thought about it. The 20-foot wall had served its purpose. It had made a statement, a loud, beige, 20-foot-high statement. Keeping it up felt like overkill now. The point was made. Okay, I said, looking Stan directly in the eye. 8 feet it is. But I want that guarantee against future spatial consideration complaints in writing, notarized, and possibly etched onto a commemorative plaque. We shook on it. The Great Wall of Gregg came down, partially. An 8-foot beige stucco wall now stands between my yard and Mrs. Gable's. It's still ugly, but it's legal and it's quiet. Most importantly, the HOA leaves me alone. Sometimes to win the war, you just have to build a ridiculously oversized monument to the absurdity of the first battle.